Just look at this room. You can't even see the floor. What's that growing over in the corner? Clean your room! Clean your room!
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Clean Your Room. I'm your host, Joseph Russitano, also go by Joey Hollywood, and what we're going to be doing here is just talking about some movies, just a handful of movies I really like. I know what you're thinking, Clean Your Room is a horrible name for a talk show about movies, but you know what? I don't think I'm going for the views here. I think I just want to talk. So if you're into that, great. I have just a list of movies I just thought I would just rant about for a little bit, and I plan on doing 6 of these episodes. And you know, if I like it and I get an amount of engagement, I might start doing like a Q&A section, but I'm going to reserve that till after I have 6 episodes in the bag. Alright, and without further ado, let's talk about some movies. First up, I want to talk about some of the movies I just recently seen. One for the first time, and then the first few I have seen many, many times. And that is the original Ghostbusters from 1984, I believe. Might be 1985. And honestly, I think this is one of the few near-perfect movies out there. It's so tightly written. It's so funny. All the characters rock. I think I've always... this is a movie I've always returned to since I was a little kid. I remember the first time I saw it. I saw it on a TV that was like... probably the size of... it was probably the size of a milk crate. It was such a tiny TV, but I remember just being so scared, and also like I just remember it just completely transporting me. Like I was so invested in that movie, and possibly my love for it is just pure nostalgia. When you see a movie that young, you never really know. But as an adult looking at it through adult eyes and the eyes of someone who just loves filmmaking in general, it is a near perfect movie in my estimation. It's so... the characters in it are so fun. I love the element of them making a business. And it's interesting to think what the movie could have been, because originally I believe it was supposed to have John Belushi and Eddie Murphy. And I would really love to see the alternate dimension where John Belushi was Peter Venkman instead of Bill Murray. Heck, maybe the sequels might have been better if that was the case, because I believe Bill Murray notoriously hates the Ghostbusters, or if he doesn't, he sure makes it seem like he does. And I feel like Ghostbusters has just a really tight script, and it's the perfect platform for these. I believe they were all Saturday Night Live alumni, if not probably SCTV in some cases. I believe a couple of them might be Canadian, and it's just perfect. Like I said, I think the movie it's shot like a horror movie, but it's a comedy, and I think that really adds to why the movie works so well. It also feels very grounded for most of the movie, and I think that's why in the third act, when the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man attacks the city like a kaiju monster, it hits such a funny beat in that moment, because you from the movie you're seeing, you're not expecting that. I mean, I guess you are now because the movie's like 40 years old, but it's such a funny comedic moment. I think there is maybe some undercooked elements of the screenplay. That's why I said it was near perfect near the beginning. I know I probably said it was perfect a moment ago, but I think it's near perfect. I think one of the problems with the movie is the idea of crossing the streams. I think it's a great device for the end of the movie, but it doesn't feel super important the moment they bring it up, because the scene that they bring up, oh, don't cross the streams, is such a low-stakes moment. And then it's the thing that ties the movie together at the very, very end. And if I had to be pedantic or overly critical. That would be the thing I'd criticize. But it's one of those movies that, like, especially when I'm sick or not feeling good or I want like a comfort movie, it's the movie I want to watch. And let's move into the sequel, Ghostbusters 2. I have a love-hate relationship with Ghostbusters 2 because I love the characters in Ghostbusters. I love Peter Venkman. I love Ray Stantz. Egon Spengler is, especially in this movie, he is so funny in this movie. Harold Ramis, I think, is probably the best part in Ghostbusters 2. And Winston is also there. And yeah, the second movie, it really sucks because I love a lot of things about it. I love where all the Ghostbusters wind up. I love that that Peter Venkman is still just being a grifter. He's doing some like terrible talk show, and he has a line in that movie where he's all, next week we'll talk about bald animals, and he picks up a bald cat and he goes, weird. It's just like a funny moment. And then Harold Ramis, when they introduce Harold Ramis, he's like slowly increasing the temperature on a couple that are having marital issues. And it is the funniest line because they're like testing a little girl to see what happiness does to her, and he's like, let's take the puppy away. Harold Ramis is so crazy in that movie. I think they imply that he had sex with slime. But I think the biggest failing of the movie is honestly the plot. It is very beat for beat the first movie, but the stuff that made the first movie really work is kind of sped through. So you see the whole first movie, they're building a business. And that's the most interesting part of that movie, is the building of that business. And then 5 years later, the business went under. We didn't see it happen. And it's interesting where they all wound up. But then the Ghostbusters are back, and then it's back in just a montage. And it's like, okay. And I think the Ghostbusters cartoon is somewhat to blame for some of this stuff, because like Janine is wearing like goofy glasses like she did in the cartoon. And she wore glasses in the original movie, but they weren't that extreme. And I feel like the toy nature of the cartoon really kind of messed up the movie. The villain of the movie, Vigo, the Carpathian, I think his name is. I like him, but also I think he's just not that interesting of a villain. The whole thing with the baby, I don't think works. As much as I love Bill Murray, I don't think his relationship with Sigourney Weaver is that convincing, and to rehash it, I don't think it works in this, and the inclusion of the baby just feels like they're turning it into a family movie. The first movie feels like a horror film. It's shot like a horror film, but it's a comedy, where Ghostbusters 2 is shot like a comedy, but it's almost like a family movie. It just feels so, I don't know, I feel like a lot of it doesn't work, and the only thing that does work is those characters. And Bill Murray looks like he doesn't want to be there for half the movie, and from what I understand, he didn't. I don't know if that's true, that's just what I hear, but it looks like he doesn't care about the movie, and that goes for like every sequel since. He just looks like he's phoning it in, which almost adds to the movie a little bit, because his character is such like a grifter, and he doesn't care. But yeah, it's those character moments that keeps bringing me back to Ghostbusters 2. It's kind of like Star Trek V, which is, I think, probably the worst of those first 6 Star Trek movies. But I love the character moments in it. Like the interactions between Bones, Spock, and Kirk are really what make that movie. And you can kind of look past the shoddy plot and that kind of thing. And I think Ghostbusters 2 has a similar problem, where the plot, a lot of the stuff just doesn't work in it. I mean, like at one point, the nerdy little professor guy just becomes a ghost for no reason, and it's never explained. And I guess you could like write the explanation in your own mind, but I think it just really speaks for how shoddy that movie is. I mean, the first movie had a giant marshmallow man, and they try to top that by having the Statue of Liberty walk down New York. And it's just, I really feel like what they should have done instead of having just a rehash of the first movie, or trying to have like a new like god threat like Zool or Vigo the Carpathian, instead of having that, what they should have done is had like a competing Ghostbusters team, like Spirit Smashers. And I think that would have, you could have had those same character moments you had from Ghostbusters 2, but you would have had a more interesting plot, because it wouldn't have just been another god attacking New York. It would have been, I guess, a more terrestrial threat of a competing Ghostbusters, which I think would be more in line with the first movie, because the first movie was about starting a business. Second movie, it would have totally worked to have a competing Ghostbusters, and I think they did that in the cartoon. I don't know, I can't remember the cartoon too well, but I think that's how you could have fixed the movie. But I mean, the movie came out like 1989, I think it came out the same year as Batman, and a lot of people say it's the movie that killed the franchise, and it might have. I don't really know. But, yeah, it's not a movie I really want to watch most of the time. It's like if I see Ghostbusters and I just want a little bit more of that, I'll throw in Ghostbusters 2, and I typically don't go anything past that. And speaking of past that, I guess I'll talk about some of the other Ghostbusters adjacent things that happened in between Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters Afterlife. Actually, I'll go back before the Ghostbusters. There was a 1975 show called The Ghostbusters. 3 words, not just one. The Ghostbusters. It was from 1975, and I believe it was produced by Filmation. If not, it was Hanna-Barbera, but I'm pretty sure it was Filmation. And I had this show on VHS tape as a kid, and it came in huge boxes. And it was basically a live-action Scooby-Doo. But instead of a dog and a group of teens, it was 2 old guys. One was like a stereotypical Italian. One was just an old man that was grumpy, and the other was a gorilla. And I actually found out recently the gorilla was a boy. My entire childhood, I thought the gorilla was a girl. And I very much liked that show as a kid. I rewatched it recently. Well, I rewatched the first episode, and it doesn't really hold up, but I think for children's television, especially in the 70s, I think it was a good time. I really liked it. It had a sequel, actually, called, I think it was just called The Ghostbusters. And the sequel show is a cartoon, and I think it came out the same year as the real Ghostbusters. But it's such a wacky concept. I think it's a robot ghost from the future that is sending the descendants of the original 75 Ghostbusters and through like a time travel adventure where they have to. It's such a bizarre concept. It's almost deserving of taking a look, because it is so weird. But yeah, that came out at the same time as the real Ghostbusters, which is such a passive-aggressive title. And they have an explanation in the show why it's called The Real Ghostbusters, and it's because the Bill Murray movie, in the context of The Real Ghostbusters, is a movie based on them. And I think there's an episode where the Real Ghostbusters sees the Ghostbusters movie, and they're like, oh, this guy looks nothing like me, because they changed up their design so they could be more recognizable as a cartoon. And I have fond memories of watching that show. I didn't watch it as it aired because I was not born in that time, but I did catch a lot of reruns as a kid. And it was always really exciting to see, like, oh, it's the real Ghostbusters, and I would like stop what I was doing to watch it because it was so rare it was on. And I think that's honestly why Ghostbusters 2 is so like the way it is, because like Ghostbusters 2 randomly has Slimer in it, and it doesn't make sense for Slimer to be in that movie, but he's in it because he was in the real Ghostbusters. And it's funny, too, because the real Ghostbusters actually references Ghostbusters 2. So, like, in universe, they acknowledge the things that happen in the movies. It's really weird. But the one I did watch as it aired was Extreme Ghostbusters. And that one was super interesting to see as it aired, because I remember not liking things about it. I did not like that it was only Egon returning, and it was like all these kids. As a kid, I hated things that were like Hello, fellow children, and that to me, that show was to me the Hello, fellow children show. And I also rewatched that very recently. Not the whole thing, of course. I do not have that kind of time, but I saw like a handful of episodes, and it's not as bad as I remember. Actually, I think it's pretty decent. It's awfully dark, which I wasn't expecting. The characters are simply okay. I think the worst thing about it is the theme song. They did the Ghostbusters theme song, but it was like a grunge version, and it's horrendous. It's absolutely awful. It's the worst thing about the show. But looking back, I think it's a fun anomaly. I didn't like regret watching it. But I tell you what I do regret watching is the 2016 Ghostbusters remake. And I say I regret watching it, but I only made it like maybe 30, 40 minutes into the movie. I can actually tell you exactly where I stopped watching the Ghostbusters remake. Chris Hemsworth is... I can't remember where it is, actually. I just remember he says he has a cat named Dog, or a dog named Cat, and I about near vomited in my mouth. It's not like... every joke in it is so unfunny. It is like every theater kid's like who thinks they're like super funny, but as a movie, it's the yes and it's yes and to the worst degree. It's so like jokes can't just be delivered like the original Ghostbusters. The humor was very subtle and very sly, like I wouldn't even say it was tongue in cheek. It was just very dry, very cynical movie, and this one was just like. Just too much ad-lib. The jokes just kept going on and on and on. And I was like, I just want to be like, please stop. This joke is not funny, and you just are stretching it out. And my tolerance ended with my cat's name is Dog, or my dog's name is Cat. Whatever. It wasn't funny. It's not worth remembering. But you know what? I never thought while watching the original Ghostbusters. I was like, you know what this movie needs? More queef jokes. I never thought that. And when that's all it has to offer is like poop and fart jokes and like horrible improv, it's like I can't see myself ever giving that movie another chance. It just, ugh. And it's funny too because a lot of the actors in that movie, a lot of the women in that movie are really, really funny outside of that movie. So I think it's purely the editors or the director's fault why that movie is so terrible. But again, I never finished it. But I tell you what, I did finish. I did finish Ghostbusters Afterlife. I've seen it at this point twice. I saw it in theaters, and then I saw it in preparation for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And that one was sort of an interesting experience because I didn't hate it. But there was a lot of things I didn't like about it. I did really like the change of scenery. When it first started, I was like, oh, thank God they're not just doing like the same thing over again. And then I got to the third act. But I liked the idea of the house and the kids, and for a while I thought they handled the death of Harold Ramis pretty well. There's a lot of nitpicks I have with it. I don't really like the idea of Egon having a family. I feel like it's funnier to think that Egon is completely asexual, and he only makes exceptions for slime, like in Ghostbusters 2. But, as far as, like, passing the torch, I guess it's a okay vehicle to do that with. But, like, there's so many characters in that movie that I feel like don't need to be there. Like, Finn Wolfhard does not need to be in that movie. He serves very little purpose. He just fixes the car. His girlfriend in the movie also just feels so extra. And... I felt like it was okay. I loved Paul Rudd's character. Paul Rudd was great in the movie. I liked the mom quite a bit. But it's in the third act where the movie just becomes a summary of the original Ghostbusters, whereas it's just the third act of the original movie again, and it's like, oh my God, I've seen this before. You did the same thing in the original. You did something pretty close in the sequel. It's literally the same thing in the video game. And then we're just doing Gozer and Zool and all that again. And it really brings down the movie for me. But I can't say that it's a bad movie. I think it's fine. I think it's an interesting jumping on point for kids. But as someone who, watched the original, it just feels like a rehash. Like, okay, I've seen this. And I really liked what they were doing with Harold Ramis's character, Egon, where he's playing chess and he's like, you never see him. And then when you see him at the very end, it, to me, felt really gross. Like, it just felt so exploitative. Like, it was supposed to... The scene was designed for people to be like, oh, it made me cry. It was so emotional. And it just felt very manipulative. And while I think the Harold Ramis CGI construction played a lot better than, say, Peter Cushing in Rogue One, I would rather have the Peter Cushing in Rogue One because it was just so jarring to see just such a weird, like, he looked like a PlayStation 3 character in that movie, where Harold Ramis, it just felt like kind of gross. But at least that happens quickly. I don't know, I had very mixed feelings about that movie, and the interesting thing about Ghostbusters Afterlife is I have no drive to rewatch that movie, the same way I have the drive to, of course, watch the original, but I don't even particularly like the second one all that much, but I have a drive to go revisit it because I love the characters. I don't love the characters in the remake. I think the little girl in the movie is kind of cute. I like Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd's probably, I think, like the only character in that movie that feels like a Ghostbuster. Or I guess the mom feels kind of like Ghostbuster-esque. But everything else just feels like, oh yeah, Stranger Things is popular. Let's try to capitalize on that. And, the first movie is so cynical and so dry, where the Afterlife feels very schmaltzy, very, very like, oh, it's about family. And it feels so weird when you're watching that in a Ghostbusters movie. I don't know. I don't hate it. It probably sounds like I hate it, but I don't hate it. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. And you know what else is perfectly fine? The sequel, Frozen Empire. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I actually just watched this for the first time, and I came out of it feeling exactly the same way as I did with Afterlife. It's just okay. There's a lot of things in it I don't like. Phoebe's the little girl. I thought she was fine in the last one. I thought she was like she was a decent character. But making the new Ghostbusters have characters, like having a main character, it feels so wrong. Because I guess Peter Venkman is the main character in the first one. But that movie really succeeds on it being an ensemble. It's those characters playing off of each other. When it's at its strongest, it's Ray versus Egon. It's Egon versus Peter. That's what really holds that movie together. So to have a main character, and especially it being like a little girl, and it feels odd for the Ghostbusters. And I would have and if it worked, if I felt like it worked, I would be fine, but I don't think it works. And especially in this one, I don't think it works. I think it worked more in the last one. But the teen angst that Phoebe is going through in this movie just doesn't work. It's kind of annoying, and her character worked best in the last movie when she was playing off of that kid podcast. And because their relationship felt very much like Egon and Ray's relationship from the original two movies. And to separate those characters and have Phoebe interacting with a ghost for most of it and expressing teen angst, it just drags the movie down. It felt like you could have just easily wrote that subplot out and just had Phoebe and podcast just doing their thing, and it would have worked so much better. Like, they could have accidentally released the ice demon or whatever, and it would have worked so much better. but it's really the thing that holds the movie back for me. I think I would have liked this movie more than the last one if it didn't have that, but instead it just feels firmly at eye level with the last movie, which I also don't love. I will never watch these movies again unless there's a sequel and I go, I guess I'll just refresh my memory on what happened. There's nothing about these movies that really make them stand on their own. The villain of Frozen Empire feels like a character from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. He doesn't feel like that much of a threat, despite the fact that he's actually killing people, which I don't think happens in any of the Ghostbusters movie up to this point. If it does, I don't remember, so I'm sure someone will be upset with me if I got that little bit of information wrong. But it's just odd. Bill Murray shows up for like 10 seconds, and that's kind of fun. You get to see Janine in a Ghostbusters uniform, so it's like a lot of fan service stuff. But I think what really worked about the movie was, I can't remember the actor's name, but he plays the fire marshal or the fire master, not the fire marshal. That's Jim Carrey. He plays the fire master. That guy felt perfect. That guy was so funny. That guy felt like he was in a Ghostbusters movie. He had that same like cynical humor that I associate with the first movie. He's like, oh yeah, I sell sneakers. Any size. What do you wear? He goes, 10. He goes, can you squeeze into an 8? Just that kind of humor. I think it worked so well. I think I would have really loved a movie with Paul Rudd, him, I guess the mom. I think those characters could have been like really great Ghostbusters. I think that cast really works well. Where the kids, I don't want to say they don't work well. I think it's not that they don't work well. I think they could work well. I think they're just being betrayed by the writing. I think there's a way you could make it work. You could make it interesting. But I don't know. The movie just didn't sit that well with me. But what I did get out of this movie was I got a Ghostbusters popcorn bucket that looks like a ghost trap. And I don't know why I bought this thing. I just, like, the little kid in me was like, oh, I want this. And I think that's enough about Ghostbusters. Let's talk about Blade Runner. Blade Runner is now one of my favorite movies, but the first time I saw it, I remember it very, very clearly. It wasn't a Blockbuster, it was like a mom and pop video store. And I remember I saw the cover of the movie at Harrison Ford. Indiana Jones is my favorite movie as a kid. I see Harrison Ford. He's got like what looks like a space gun, and there's spaceships everywhere. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Indiana Jones in space. I need to see this movie. And as a little kid, I rented this movie, and I absolutely hated it. It was, as a kid, I felt it was super boring. And I just could not believe how boring it was. I think I fell asleep watching it, because I was way too young to watch the movie. None of this stuff like really resonated with me because I was expecting Indiana Jones in space. And I want to say it was maybe like 10 years later. I don't know how old I was when I watched the movie. I was very little. My age was in the single digits. But maybe 10 years later, I was like thinking about the movie, because even though I didn't like it, a lot of the imagery stuck in my mind. For years and years and years, I would just constantly think about how pretty the movie was. But I couldn't really remember anything about the plot. And I took a chance and I watched it on, I think it was Dish Network. And I remember just seeing it in a whole new light with maturity, as mature as you can be when you're in your teens. And, it was such a more beautiful experience watching it. My love for the movie has only grown since then, and I've since seen every incarnation of it. And I know a lot of people say like, oh, you should only watch the director's cut or the final cut, and I can see why. I think those are technically superior versions of the movie, but there is a part of me that just loves the horrible narration in the movie. It feels like a more sound movie, and I often hear that Harrison Ford purposely botched the narration, and if he did, It's not great narration, but after all these years, it is my preferred version of the movie. While completely admitting that the final cut is a lot better. I do like the color correction, the color grading more in the final cut. I think the only thing I dislike about the final cut, and I'm not sure how many other people agree with me about this, but I think the thing I really dislike about the final cut is the ending. And I don't really like the ending in the theatrical cut either, because in the theatrical cut, they're driving in the mountains, and it's this beautiful scenic thing, and it doesn't fit the movie at all. But at least it has an ending, unlike the other versions. The director's cut and the final cut and all that, they just randomly, the movie doesn't end, it just stops. And I've always thought, there's a way you can fix that. Just end with a scenic shot of the city. Just have a car take off and fly away in the city, into the smog of the city. And it would have felt so much better as an ending. But instead, he's like, all right, get your stuff, let's go. And then the movie just stops. It just stops. The doors close and the credits roll. And I feel like it's not a satisfactory way of concluding the little adventure you went on, because it does, I don't know, for me it's not satisfying. But I love the movie. No matter what version I watch, I feel like the movie is super engaging. I've heard it called, it's a mystery movie without a mystery, which is, I think, a very apt criticism of it. But I feel like the strengths of the movie outweigh a lot of the weaknesses. I really like Harrison Ford's performance in it, the one that's not narrated. I really like a lot of the characters. Just Rutger Hauer is such a powerhouse in that movie. My love for the movie is wholly based on the visuals of the movie. I feel like there's very little ways you could make that movie better, and I think the only way is just to fix the ending on every single version of the movie. Just have a wide shot of the city. I think that's all you need to do to fix the ending. Honestly, this is probably the most vapid discussion of Blade Runner, because I'm just oh, it's visually great. I'm just saying the same things over again. But what can you say about a movie that's so good? It's everyone has said everything in the past about how good this movie is. I feel I don't know. It's one of the best movies in a lot of people's minds, and I think there's a good reason for that. It's one of Ridley Scott's best movies. I think Alien might be better, but I don't return to Alien as much as I do Blade Runner. Blade Runner is the perfect movie to just sit back, relax, zone out, just embrace that beautiful atmosphere, those amazing special effects. I don't think the special effects in that movie have been topped since. A lot of people don't know, but Blade Runner is the start of a trilogy of movies. At least right now it is. I'm sure they're probably going to make another one in a few years. But for the longest time, what we thought the sequel to Blade Runner was Soldier with Kurt Russell. And that was a movie I saw purely because I heard it was a sequel to Blade Runner. And it is it is the exact opposite of Blade Runner in almost every way. To this day, I don't really understand how it's a sequel or an interquel or whatever bizarre word they use to say that it's set in the Blade Runner universe. But it is an interesting movie. You get to see, the movie starts off with you see a very young Kurt Russell, and he's they're desensitizing him to violence. They're showing they're killing animals in front of all these kids, and it's really shocking. And they're making them into soldiers, hence the title, to fight some sort of war. And then it just kind of becomes like a Dances with Wolves type movie where he meets the native people of this planet, and then he fights for them. It's very by the numbers, and I can't remember because it's been a while since I've seen it, but I don't think Kurt Russell says anything in the movie, or if he does, he says very, very little. But I don't know, it's a fun movie, and it's a weird bit of trivia that it's technically set in the Blade Runner universe, I guess. But yeah, the thing I remember the most is just how violent the movie was, because it's a very violent action movie, which is bizarre to think that it's set in that Blade Runner universe, because it doesn't have the aesthetic or anything. You have to be told that it's a Blade Runner movie to know that it's to know it, because like I feel like if you see Blade Runner 2049, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is like set in the same universe, despite the fact that that movie has its own look to it. And I guess I'll talk about that movie too. Blade Runner 2049 is a lot of the things that are the strengths of the original Blade Runner. Just how crowded that movie looks. There's so many people just packed together like sardines. It feels so like stressful in the atmosphere. Where 2049, there's so much space. It's a beautiful movie, but there's so much space in it. The cinematography is amazing, and I feel like a lot of people who didn't like 2049 did not like that they went against a lot of the choices made in the original, because you don't get the idea that this is a world that has too many people in it, because there is so much space. I think the opening shot of the movie is in the middle of a field, and yeah, there's so many moments in the movie where there's no one around, and I feel like every moment in the original is so oppressive because there's just so many people packed together, and it's so like tight. You feel like this is a dystopia, where I don't really feel like you get that vibe so much in 2049. But I think it makes up for that with the visuals. I think the character growth of Ryan Gosling's character, I forget his name, but I feel like that really makes the movie. The original movie is a mystery movie without a mystery, where 2049 has a mystery, and I think it's a pretty compelling one. And I really feel like that is a worthy sequel. It's such a shame that it didn't do well in the box office. People always talk about how much of a failure it is, but I think it's gained a rather strong cult following. Like, I don't think you'll meet many people that dislike it, and the few who do just don't like it because they don't maintain the whole overpopulation element of the original. But I think they brought back Harrison Ford's character in a compelling and realistic way, which is not common for legacy sequels nowadays. They're usually kind of just shoehorned in. I also really like that Harrison Ford's character was not dressed exactly the same as he was in the original movie, like other movies like Star Wars or Indiana Jones, where there's just no character growth whatsoever. He's just like, oh, my life stopped between movies, and now I'm old. No, it seems like he's continued to grow as a character, and I think that speaks to the director of that movie. And that's the movie that really put him on my radar, because I've been aware of Enemy and some of the other films he'd done, but I never watched them. It was Blade Runner that really introduced me to him. And, I'm always going to check out what he's doing nowadays. Even if I end up not liking the movie, I'm just going to keep checking out his stuff, because he has such a strong visual style that I really connect with and I really like. But enough about those artsy movies like Blade Runner. Let's talk about Windy City Heat. Possibly my favorite comedy. I don't know. I love this movie, and I think it needs to be seen by everyone in the world. It is so funny. Basically what this movie is, if you haven't seen it already, which is probably likely, but this movie is kind of like a documentary about a group of people gaslighting and pranking one individual. They make him think he's the star of a movie, and it is so funny. You see, there's the guy's name is Perry Caravello, and at the time of this movie's release, they had been messing with him for, I think, 11 years, maybe 13, something crazy like that, and they're still messing with him to this day. But this came out like 2003, and what they do is they convince him that he is not only going to star in a movie, that this is his big break. And the whole movie, they're just screwing with him like over and over again. Like when he's at the audition for the movie, they keep interrupting his audition and screaming at him, and he's like, "You're gonna cost me the role." And Bobcat Goldthwait is the director, and he refuses to talk without his megaphone. and and Dean Cook is there, and he says he's Roman Polanski, and they trick him into thinking that he got the role of the movie, and then the entire shoot of the movie they're just continuing to mess with him. Like there's a part in the movie where they keep on throwing him in a dumpster, and it's for the movie. Like, oh, it doesn't look realistic enough. Let's throw him in the dumpster again, and they just keep on throwing Perry in the dumpster, right? And then Bobcat Goldthwait comes out, and he's like, you know what? This isn't realistic enough. You know what? We need to fill up the dumpster with poop. And Perry's like, why? Why do we need to do this? And then he's like, no, it's going to be more realistic. So they throw him into the dumpster with poop. And Don Barris, who's the mastermind behind trolling Perry, goes, hey, if you don't want to do this, why don't you just ask for a stunt double? And goes, yeah, I want a stunt double. So they start doing all of his stunts with a stunt double. And then the next day, there's this woman that Perry has been pining for the entire shoot. And they're about to shoot the sex scene. He's gonna be intimate with this woman that he's been trying to get with the entire movie. And they're about to kiss, and then Bobcat goes, cut, all right, bring in the stunt double. And he's like, what? Why? And he goes, well, the sex scenes are considered stunts, and you wanted a stunt double. So, like, every decision Perry makes, they just make him regret it every single time. And it's funny, too, because, like, I guess they thought that Perry was going to flip out because of that, but they forgot that Perry was lactose intolerant, and for some scene they made him eat this disgusting concoction like 3 times, and there was cheese in it, and the cheese made him like just made his stomach like explode, and he's like, all right, I'm leaving. It was like the one thing they didn't expect. So he runs to the bathroom and he starts just having horrible stomach problems in the bathroom, and then like everyone is just knocking on the door asking him if he's okay, and he's like, leave me alone. And it's funny too, because like you never really know if Perry's in on the joke or not, because it seems like he kind of is. Like, he understands that there is a prank being played upon him, but he doesn't understand how it's funny, because when they reveal it to him in the bonus features of the movie, it's like he understands that it's funny, but he doesn't know why. It's very interesting. And through this movie, I started listening to the podcast, and the podcast is even funnier. Like, they make him, like, reenact. They make him... You know what? I can't even give any more of this movie away. You just have to see it. It's on YouTube for free. There's also a 6-hour work print of the movie, which I've never finished, but I want to, because it's so much more. Like, there's scenes where, like, a cop car pulls over the limo they're in, and Don Barris, like, goes, hey, can you hold this stuff for me? And he pulls out a gun and a bag of weed, and he's like, what are you doing? And I really want to see if there's more stuff like that in the 6-hour cut. At this point in time, I haven't seen it. But if you have not seen Windy City Heat, it is the funniest prank movie you'll ever see. It is so great. And since we're speaking about movies that I think are underrated and more people should see, I want to talk about a movie called Running Time. I think it came out in 1997. It's directed by Josh Baker, I believe that's his name. He worked on Hercules and Xena, and it stars Bruce Campbell. It's in black and white, and it's done in the illusion of a single take. It is, I think maybe, I don't want to say it's my favorite movie that's done in this style. I think at one point in time it was, and then I saw the movie 1917, which that really isn't done in the illusion of a single take. That's done in the illusion of 2 takes. But Running Time is a heist movie, a heist gone wrong movie, and it's all done in the illusion of a single take. It's really awesome. It opens up with Bruce Campbell's character named Carl. He's getting out of prison, and you follow him from prison to meeting up with his crew. They're gonna knock over this laundry business that is secretly shifting money around, and without giving too much away, things go wrong. And it's such an awesome movie in terms of guerrilla filmmaking, interesting concept, how you tell a story like that in a method that you wouldn't think naturally would suit it. There's so many interesting things in it because you follow him from the moment he's released from prison there to him getting picked up. There's a real-time sex scene, which is very awkward. And from what I understand, it was really awkward for Bruce Campbell because his wife was the clothing designer on the movie, I think. And she had to sit there and watch him have that scene happen. But it really kicks in the high gear when they have the heist and all the things that follow afterwards. It's such a thrill ride. It's such a great movie. It's so underrated. It recently got released on Blu-ray, and it was far too late for that to happen. That movie rocks. It's honestly, I think, my favorite Bruce Campbell movie. It's my favorite performance from him. Actually, I take that back. It's not my favorite performance from him because the third season of Ash vs. Evil Dead, I think he delivers a really great performance in the final episode. But until that point, I was like, wow, Bruce Campbell, I wish he was in more things. He should have been a big star. He's my favorite actor, and I think this is one of his best movies. If you have not seen it, you should definitely seek it out. It is that good. It's better than Hitchcock's The Rope. I'm trying to think of other single-take movies besides 1917. Maybe The Silent House, which is a Spanish film. But that movie, even though it's not a found footage movie, that movie looks like a found footage movie. I think they remade it in America, too. I never saw that one. Oh, God, what is the Spanish version called? I think it's called, La Casa Silencio or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, it's a great movie, really interesting. You could see where a lot of the single takes are, but there's so much imaginative filmmaking in here. That they have a flashback sequence, but they do it with the illusion of a single take. And how do you do a flashback in the illusion of a single take? Well, you simply can't. And what's interesting is the way they accomplish that. It's very interesting. It's very surreal. For a movie that's very grounded, that moment's very surreal. It's my favorite moment in the movie. Bruce Campbell goes down a tunnel, and he's been shot, and he's, delirious. And it's such a great scene. If you have not seen Running Time, 100% go check that movie out. It is worth your time. If you see any movie on here that I'm talking about, which I'm talking about some pretty popular movies, so you've probably seen them all, but if you've seen any movie on here, watch Windy City Heat and Running Time. You will not regret it. But speaking of regrets, let's talk about David Lynch's Dune. Now, I don't regret watching this movie. I kind of love it. But David Lynch himself regrets making this movie, which is funny because a lot of the actors that he uses in all of his projects since were actors he met on the set of Dune. And personally, I really love the aesthetic of this movie. I really love the first 2/3 of it. It's really interesting. I feel like they deliver the story in a very interesting way. The first part of the Dune novel is probably my favorite part of that book too. All the espionage and political stuff, all that stuff in the first part of the Dune book is so awesome. And I think they do a decent job. I mean, everyone in that movie is constantly narrating their thoughts. It's like information overload. And I think the reason why they did that is the book itself is so dense, and they're like, how do we deliver all this information to you? And I guess the closest thing they could figure out how to do that was just to have people constantly narrating in their minds. And at times it works, but most of the time it doesn't. But it's really interesting to see a lot of these actors that I've become so familiar with outside of this movie. Like Patrick Stewart, I think, plays Gurney. He either plays Gurney or Duncan Idaho. No, Duncan Idaho's... They kill off Duncan Idaho really fast. Duncan Idaho has almost no character in this movie. But Gurney is more of a character, and he's played by Patrick Stewart, and the man just who until recently just never aged. and there's the pugs, and my favorite part of that movie, my favorite part of Dune, is they have the Mentat. The Baron Harkonnen has the Mentat of the Atreides, and he's like, I've put poison in your system, and the only way you can get the antidote for this poison is you have to milk this cat every day for the antidote. And he brings out a cat, and it's a bald cat with a rat duct taped to it. And he's like, you have to milk this cat, and it's never brought up ever again. There's actually a toy of this, and I really want this toy, and I don't need it. I'm trying not to buy like dumb, useless things. Like I hate Funko Pop stuff. I don't want to have any more of those things, and man, it's such a weird like thing that happened. But yeah, I like that movie. I like it to a degree. I like how weird it is. There's actually a fan edit of the movie, and in recent years, when I do return to the David Lynch Dune, I've been watching the fan edit, which is a combination of the theatrical version, the extended cut, and the TV cut, I believe, and it tells a more whole story, and which is great for me because I really like the book, and I feel like when it covers the first volume of the book, it is really strong, and then it completely falls apart when it goes into the last 2 volumes of the original Dune novel, because they summarize it in like 40 minutes, at least in the extended cut I've been watching. In the theatrical cut, like the fan edit I watch is like 3 hours long. The theatrical cut is 2 hours, and I can't quite remember how that movie goes, but I remember it just completely falls apart in that third act, because they're summarizing basically, like, I think it's supposed to take 4 years in the novel, all that stuff, and they're trying to summarize it all. It's a very, very flawed but very, very interesting movie, in my opinion. And there clearly is something there, because I keep going back to it. I think probably David Lynch was the worst choice for the movie, and I think Dino De Laurentiis chose him for the movie because he saw Eraserhead and was like, this is a weird movie. Dune seems like a weird story. Hey, you do Dune, you know, and that might have been a bad choice, but I love all the weird little things that I think only David Lynch could bring to that movie, and as much of a failure as it is, I am glad it exists. I think probably the most accurate adaptation of Dune is the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, and that's got its problems too. I particularly do not like the actor they chose for Paul. In fact, I think the cast, for the most part, in the Dune miniseries is pretty weak in comparison to the other versions, with one very, very notable exception, and that is Baron Harkonnen. Baron Harkonnen is, I think this is the best iteration of him. He is so delightfully evil in this version. It almost makes the whole movie worth watching. If you like the newer Dune movies, I definitely recommend checking out the miniseries. It is a very far cry from the newer ones in terms of like production value. It's a TV series from the Sci-Fi Channel from 2001. Of course, it's not going to look great. There's moments where it looks like a really good episode of Stargate, and it never gets anywhere beyond that. I think also the design of the sandworms is really good in the Dune miniseries. I think actually I like their design more than the other 2 on-screen versions. It just makes more sense that they would have like a mouth that would open and close and not just a permanently open one like they do in the new Dune movies. And I think the best part about that Dune miniseries is it has a sequel. They adapt Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, but of course they just call it Children of Dune. And it's 3 episodes long. They cover Dune Messiah in 1 episode, for better or for worse. But the strength of that particular miniseries is the adaptation of Children of Dune, which has a very young James McAvoy as Leto II. And he's great. I think in the book he's supposed to be like 12 years old, and James McAvoy's like clearly in his early 20s. But that's really where a lot of the more interesting stuff happens. You see Paul come back and he's like completely blind. And the way they did his blindness is really funny because they just made him wear black contact lenses instead of like, I don't know, like they could have just had him like have his eyes covered. Actually, the way they do the eyes in the Dune miniseries is really interesting. They have them wearing like these weird contact lenses, and they have a black light. So every time they're looking at the camera, there's clearly like a black light underneath the camera, and it's causing like a weird effect on their eyes. It's interesting visually, and it's a good workaround, so they're not just like going frame by frame, coloring their eyes blue like they did in the original. And I think they do that in the new one as well. And while we're on the subject of Dune, let's talk about Dune Part 1. I actually took my little sister to go see this movie, and she had no idea what Dune was at the time. And as we're watching the movie, I read the book, and I'd seen the previous adaptations before, and as we were watching the movie, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this movie is not explaining anything to the audience. My sister's probably so confused. And ends up she was, but I think it almost helped her get more into it because she started reading the books herself. I really, really like Dune Part 1 visually, but not narratively. To adapt Dune, it should have been adapted into a 3-part series. The first one being, the first volume. It should have ended with Paul escaping the attack, the Harkonnen attack. I think that's where the movie really should have ended. And there should have been a second movie that's all about Paul falling in love with Chani and becoming Muad'Dib and stuff like that. And then the third one should have been, the attack on the Emperor and the Jihad and things like that. But unfortunately, the movie, like where it comes to its natural end point, there's like 40 minutes after that, and the pacing of the movie is very, very strained because of it. And because the movie doesn't really explain a whole lot, it just feels like it's meandering quite a bit. But it's so visually interesting that I personally kind of give it a pass. Plus, I'm very familiar with the source material. I'm actually honestly surprised that it seems to be doing so well. Like, so many people seem to like it. And as much as I have like my own personal qualms with it, I'm really happy something like this is getting like the recognition it is. Timothée Chalamet, I think I might dislike him as an actor, but he's in a lot of movies I like, and I don't mind him in this. I actually think he might be the best Paul of the three. As much as I like Kyle MacLachlan, he's not a very great Paul. I think Timothée Chalamet does a decent job in this first movie, but I feel like he should have bulked up for the sequel when it happened. Because my reading of the book is that he's supposed to be like a kid, and you see him grow. Because I think the book takes place for the course of like 4 or 5 years. Because he has a child. He has 2 children. No, he has a child, and then the child dies. This is not a spoiler for the movie, by the way, because they don't touch this at all in these new movies. I just feel like it's visually stunning. I love the Baron's great in this. I think I prefer the one from the miniseries, but he's great in this. I really like this director a lot. He did Dune. He did Blade Runner 2049. So like he's anything that this guy touches, I'm going to check out. But I think the biggest problem I had with it was just the pacing. I think there's great set pieces in it, but the narrative structure around the movie, it just feels too loose, too fluid, where you don't really understand where the scene is taking you, which is not a problem I feel like the book has, or it's not a problem I feel like the original Dune has for the first 2/3 of it, the original Dune movie, I mean, and it's certainly not a problem the miniseries has. So I think it's a interesting problem that's unique to this version, but I think its strengths far outweigh its weaknesses. And I think enough people complained about it, because I know I'm not the only one who complained about it, but I think enough people did that the second movie, Dune Part 2, fixes a lot of problems that people had with the first one. And speaking of which, let's talk about Dune Part 2. I have very mixed feelings about this movie. It is a superior movie to the first one, in my opinion, 100%. But my qualms with it purely come from the fact that I am familiar with the source material. I think if I had never read the book, if I had never seen any other version, I would not have the problems I have. So I think that's more so a reflection on me and not the movie itself. I think the movie is fine. My problem comes from the fact that I know where these characters go, and I'm a little nervous as to what the future may hold when they adapt Dune Messiah. Zendaya's character, Chani, they wanted to give her agency. That's what they kept saying in the promotion material. And they may have, but they also, by giving her agency, they made her character completely irrelevant in the movie. Like, she serves kind of no purpose. Because the tragedy of Chani's character is her blind devotion towards Paul, her love of Paul. They have a kid together, and the kid dies, and that brings Paul and her closer together. She serves a purpose in the book. And by making her calling out Paul as a false messiah in the movie, kind of, I don't want to say it ruins her character, but like, I don't know, it just doesn't add to it. Because the ending of the book where Paul's mother says to Chani, they call us concubines now, but history will record us as wives, is such a powerful moment for Chani's character. And to just make her whiny and go cry into the sand dunes while Paul continues his jihad into the stars, it makes me wonder, like, where is this character going to go? Because Paul's devotion for her and the kids that they have, it sets up so much in the sequels, and I don't quite understand how they're going to accomplish those things in the sequels if Paul and her do not have the close relationship. Because Paul, of course, marries the princess, but he's completely cut off from her. He's like, you will bear no children of mine. I'm purely marrying you for political purposes. And Chani will be the mother of his children. And that sets up a lot of events in Children of Dune and Dune Messiah. Like, changing that one thing is so, I think, detrimental. And I say I think because I don't know where they're going to take it. Hopefully they can pull it off. And I trust the director. I think he has a plan in place. Another thing I don't like about this movie is they completely eliminated Paul's sister from the movie, and they took away a lot of her moments and gave them to Paul. At one point, the Bene Gesserit calls Paul an abomination, which he isn't. His sister's the abomination, and the only reason why it's in the movie is because that's a big moment in the book. And then making Paul kill the Baron in the most underwhelming way possible is so disappointing, because when Paul's sister kills the Baron in the book, that sets up a chain of events that has like 13,000 years of consequences. And I genuinely don't know how they're going to do. Well, it may not be that big of a deal in Dune Messiah too much, but it's definitely a big deal with Children of Dune. So I really don't know where they're taking the story. And all these criticisms are just, I guess, nitpicks, because the movie is fine. It's a well-made movie. It's structured pretty well. My problem is I don't know how they're going to adapt to the sequels that I really want to see adapted. But I think that's just a me thing. That's not a fault of the movie. That's a fault of myself for being too attached to the source material, I guess. I'm completely fine with a director changing the source material if it works, and I think in the context of this movie it works. But I guess I guess I won't know for sure until I see Dune Messiah in a couple years. Let's take the conversation from the sandy deserts of Dune to something a little bit more hydrating. Let's talk about Jaws. Jaws is one of my favorite movies. I remember as a kid in my high school film class, I became obsessed with the vertigo shot. And I believe it's not the first time I saw it, but it was the first time I registered that was a film technique, was in Jaws. And I became obsessed with trying to replicate it. I remember I made a bunch of short films that use the vertigo shot improperly, all because of Jaws. It's such a great movie. It's more than just a monster flick. I think we've seen this type of movie a million times since, and probably a million times before. We can't close the beaches because this is our time we make money. Grizzly did that. Orca I don't think did that. But that's a standard monster movie plot. Oh, no one believes the main character and there's consequences because of it. But outside of that plot, I feel like there's a very human element to that movie. I love all the characters in that movie. I love the parts where they're just talking on the boat. I think one of my favorite parts of that movie is when Sheriff Brody is just having a quiet moment with his son. And I really feel like mainstream movies nowadays don't have quiet human moments like that anymore. At least not the ones I've been seeing. I kind of miss that. I feel like the humanity a lot of modern movies is gone. And I love revisiting these older ones because that just felt like such a real, pure moment. It's my favorite moment in the movie, actually. There's all these, like, there's all so much cool stuff in Jaws. And my favorite moment is when he's having just a little moment with his kid. But that movie's like Hollywood royalty, that movie. I feel like every movie that's at least somewhat similar to it in premise, like Orca or Grizzly or half a dozen other movies, it's the bar, it's the standard. Everything is compared to it, and rightfully so. This was back when Steven Spielberg was just making hit after hit after hit. Man, it's crazy to think that one man can have so many fantastic movies. Love Jaws. I saw it in theaters recently, and I took my little sister to go see it, and she hated it. She was like, I don't get what the big deal is. And I guess I kind of get it, because there's been so much time in between. So many movies have ripped it off, and they've ripped it off in a more like exciting way, I guess. So if you come to it later on, it's like, what's so special about this? I think maybe John Carpenter's Halloween is probably in the same camp, like, because everything ripped that off and they made it more violent. So it's like, oh, what's the big deal about this movie? I've seen this before. It's just really slow. And I get that perspective from a younger person who's not quite as into movies as like someone else might be. But yeah, Jaws is fantastic. Just talking about it makes me want to throw it on right now. But let me kill that intention by talking about Jaws 2. Jaws 2 is the first Jaws movie I ever saw. I remember popping up in the middle of the movie and just being completely lost as to how any of this could happen. Like, I remember they keep on blowing up the shark in every movie. I think they blow him up in every single one. I think I'll get to it in a minute, but I think the most ridiculous one is in Jaws 4. But no, they don't blow him up in the second one. I think he bites a power line. Close enough. They blow him up with the power line. But yeah, and it's just the same movie over again. And I hate that. I hate when they do that. It's the Ghostbusters thing. Like, I don't even know how you could make a sequel to Jaws. Oh, there's another shark. I feel like the only way you could make a sequel to Jaws is if you don't tie it to the original. It's just another shark attacking another family. Maybe there's a shark in a lake. Or so, I don't know. Like, the method that they did it is baffling to me. And the weirdest part is about it, as much as I'm criticizing it, it's probably the best Jaws sequel. Mainly because it just continues those characters, and I know I was just complaining about it, but that's the problem with making a movie that's just the same movie over again. Is like, well, I like these characters, but nothing new is happening here. I guess I like the idea of all those kids being trapped on the raft. I guess that's a fun idea, but it is the definition of a needless remake. As much as I think Jaws 2 is a better movie, I personally really like Jaws 3D, which was the second Jaws movie I ever saw. Sadly, the original Jaws was the last movie I saw of this franchise. I've heard that Dennis Quaid was like coked out of his mind and doesn't remember filming this movie at all. And that might be true. I don't know. His performance is not as crazy as you'd imagine for someone who's apparently coked out of his mind. But I really like the premise of it being at a water park. I think that's really fun. There's a lot of fun things about the movie. And I think that's what keeps me coming back to it. Because it's not a good movie. Oh man, I remember as a kid watching the shark go through the glass because it's in 3D. They had to make the shark go through the glass, and it was supposed to like be coming at the camera, but the effect doesn't work at all, so it looks like he like ghosts through the glass and then the glass shatters. None of the 3D works in that movie at all, and I think it honestly makes the movie more entertaining that it doesn't work. I don't know. If you gave me the choice of watching the legitimate Jaws sequels, I probably would choose Jaws 3D just because I find it fun. Jaws 4, The Revenge, on the other hand, it is so bad. And there's moments of it that I think are so bad they're good, but it's not enough to sustain watching the movie. And honestly, it's one of the weird, like, everyone's like, oh, the book is better. And I guess the book is better in the sense that the book has a reason why the shark is attacking the Brody family and has been following them across the globe. Because in the book, it's like a voodoo priest possesses the shark and is trying to go after the Brodys for some reason. Oh, and Sheriff Brody's dead, and it's all about his wife. Because who cared about her in that movie? And then... and they redo the moment from the original movie that I like so much, the quiet moment with the kid, and it just shows a less capable filmmaker doing the same scene not working because it's supposed to be Brody's son, his other son, because I think Dennis Quaid is the son in Jaws 3D, and I think they just ignore that movie even existed. What's his name? Michael Caine's in it. And there's a really famous interview where he's like, have you seen Jaws the Revenge? He goes, no, but I've seen the house it bought my mom. I've seen the checks it brought in, which is probably like the best attitude to have when you make something so bad. And the version I saw as a kid, the shark blows up. I think they like stab it and it blows up. But on Blu-ray, it's a different version of the ending, which doesn't... It's not quite as satisfactory. It's just weird. And the shark's like growling like a tiger the whole movie. It pulls... There's some interesting stuff in it. Like when he pulls down the helicopter, that's fun. Or when they're in their little like mini subs. That stuff's all cool. Those are cool little set pieces. But the movie itself is just so cheap. It's so like... Jaws should never have had a sequel, let alone 3 sequels. They keep on talking about rebooting it, and what's even the point? But I say that, and I tell you what, right now, I will be first in line to see another Jaws movie if they make it, because I just gotta know what's gonna happen. I don't recommend the Jaws sequels at all, even the ones I like. But you know what I would recommend checking out? Jaws 5: Cruel Jaws. This is a real movie. And it is, I don't want to say plagiarism, but it's the most interesting example of copyright infringement I've ever seen. It's an Italian movie, because Italians do not care about copyright. And not just the fact that they made a sequel to Jaws that doesn't exist, that's not allowed to exist. Because if you buy this movie now, it'll just say Cruel Jaws. It won't say Jaws 5. I have a special version of it with a cover that says Jaws 5, and it was a limited edition, just because I love this movie a lot. But it's not just that it's Jaws and it's pretending to be a Jaws sequel. It's that they're stealing music from other movies. I think they steal the soundtrack from Indiana Jones and Star Wars. So not only is it stealing from Lucas and Spielberg in title recognition, but it's stealing like John Williams music. And I don't know how they released this on Blu-ray recently, because it just seems like a copyright nightmare. But it's such a bizarre movie, too. It stars a Hulk Hogan impersonator. It's so incompetently directed. And all the footage from the movie is stolen from Jaws, and also a movie called, I believe it's either Great White or The Last Shark. I can't remember. It's one of those 2 movies. Heck, it might have been both. It is such an interesting anomaly that if you haven't seen it and you like weird things like that, go check it out. I love Italy's obsession with making illegal sequels. They also made a Terminator 2 like several years before the real Terminator 2. They also made an Alien 2 that was made several years before the real Alien 2. Just bizarre fun. I've actually seen Jaws 5 probably more times than Jaws the Revenge, and I don't regret it. And speaking of no regrets, let's talk about one of my favorite movies of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark. How's that for a segue? Raiders of the Lost Ark is the movie that got me fascinated with filmmaking. I want to say I was 5 or 6 years old. I was probably 5. It's been so long, but I remember the event very clearly. My grandmother took me to Walmart, and she said, "You can have any movie you want. Just pick it out, and we'll take it home." And they had this box set that had all the Indiana Jones movies in it, right? And that was a little bit out of the price range, but she bought it for me anyways. And I remember sitting down and watching Raiders of the Lost Ark for the very first time, and it just blew my little kid mind. It wasn't just the fact that it was this like action adventure movie. It was almost like putting together a puzzle in my mind. I remember the specific scene. There's 2 scenes that really captured my my fascination, and that was the first scene was where they're dumping all the exposition and all the characters are interrupting each other and talking about the Ark. That scene really fascinated me because they were just interrupting each other. I don't know why, but there's something about that scene that as a little kid, I was seeing the construction of the scene for some reason. But what really fascinated me was the car chase scene where Indiana Jones is climbing on the top of the car and all the Nazis are, climbing on the sides. That scene like blew me away. I remember watching it over and over and over again and then pausing it and like doing like with the remote, trying to watch it in slow motion just to see how the scene was constructed. It was like a puzzle piece. It was like building a puzzle for me, and it blew my mind. I wanted to recreate it. And it was the editing of that movie that really just what was the foundation of me becoming more and more obsessed with filmmaking and what goes into making a movie. What is the magic behind what we're seeing on screen? And to this day, that is, I think, that movie holds a very special place for me. That's the movie that made me want to make movies. And then not to mention, it's just a fun action movie on top of it. It's always constantly building from one scene to the next. It doesn't give you, it not only, like, I feel like a lot of modern action movies now, they build off of each scene and it's moving really quickly, but you never stop to think, this movie doesn't make any sense. Like Star Trek 2009. That movie makes no sense at all, but it moves so quickly you don't really notice on a first viewing. The first, Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's a sound movie, and it moves at that pace. Fantastic movie. That's a movie that I could just throw on whenever and just sit through the whole thing, and it's so much fun. All the dialogue in that movie is like burned into my brain. That movie and the first Evil Dead are very big movies for me because Indiana Jones made me feel like I wanted to make movies, where Evil Dead was the movie that made me go, hey, maybe I can make movies. And I've since then I've dabbled here and there in that, and with a variety of results, but I don't regret it. And I just think that's such an amazing movie. It's my favorite Spielberg film. I know someone will probably say like, oh, Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan. And, those may be technically better movies, but the movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, is a very important movie to me. Temple of Doom, I know a lot of people dislike it for a smorgasbord of reasons, but I actually really like that one too. I love Short Round. He's, some people say he's annoying. I don't think he's annoying. I do think Willie is annoying. I can't say that she's not annoying in that movie, but I don't know, that movie. Well, I said the first Indiana Jones, that movie, like, it moves at a quick pace, and the plot seems to build off each other and everything seems to make sense. Temple of Doom, not so much. There's a lot of leaps in logic in that movie, and it kind of doesn't matter because it's just a ride. It's the movie equivalent of a ride, and it also scared the living crap out of me as a kid. That scene where he rips that guy's heart out, I remember the first time I watched it, I turned the movie off, and I don't think I watched it. I don't think I finished it for like a couple weeks, because like I had to have closure. So as a little kid me, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna fast forward to where I was and finish the movie. And there was a time where I feel like Temple of Doom was my favorite. Just because, I was a little kid and I was like, this movie's fun. I like Short Round. I kind of liked that it scared me. But the test of time has really shown that Raiders of the Lost Ark is, I think, the superior movie of that original trilogy. Speaking of trilogy, let's talk about the third movie, Last Crusade. And just like Temple of Doom, there was a time in my life where I used to say that Last Crusade was my favorite movie. Over the years, though, I've grown less warm towards it, because the thing that really makes that movie is the relationship between Indiana Jones and his father. And there's some really excellent action sequences. The scene on the tank is fantastic, but it feels like a rehash of the first one in a lot of ways. It feels like a remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but with a father-son dynamic. That's not a bad thing. It just makes me return to that movie less. Because, like, okay, well, I like all these movies, but I'm going to go see the first one again. But I can't knock the fact that the thing that works best in that movie is Harrison Ford and his dad. Sean Connery is awesome in that movie. I think that's I think that's my favorite Sean Connery role. I know some people are going to be like, but James Bond. I don't care. I love Sean Connery in that movie. He's so fun. I don't really see him play such fun roles like that. Maybe that's a problem with me not picking the right Sean Connery movies. But I love him in that movie. I love his performance in that movie. And that tank scene, it's such an amazing scene, but I don't think it's as well constructed as the car chase scene with the Ark of the Covenant in the first one, but it's still very, very action-packed. I remember as a kid just being like, oh my gosh. And then you got that opening with River Phoenix as young Indiana Jones, which is a fun way to kick off the movie. And I always wondered if River Phoenix didn't pass away, if he would have played young Indiana Jones in the TV series. I don't know when River Phoenix passed away. He might have been alive when Sean Patrick Flanery was playing him. Speaking of which, let's talk about young Indiana Jones for a minute. So I kind of got a love-hate relationship with young Indiana Jones. I've seen every episode of Young Indiana Jones a minimum of 10 times. And the ones I've only seen 10 times, I can tell you exactly which ones those are. It's the first 5 or 6. Any one with Baby Indy, with Corey Cunningham, I believe is his name. Those ones just all kind of suck. There's a fun one I think it's called Travels with Father. And that one's okay. But the rest kind of blow. And it's kind of interesting because they re-edited them for the home video release. Because the original pilot episode is split into 2 segments. One segment has Corey Cunningham as young Indy, and then the second half has Sean Patrick Flanery as an older young Indy. That episode's called Curse of the Jackal, and it has George Hall bookending it with old Indy segments. In that version, as much as I don't like George Hall as Indiana Jones, I think that's a better piece to introduce you to young Indiana Jones, where the episodes that you can get on home video, they split up Curse of the Jackal into My First Adventure and Spring Break Adventure. And they are both incredibly compromised. It's a terrible introduction to the show. But where young Indiana Jones really picks up is during World War I. I love the young Indiana Jones World War I movies. They're all so fun. I think there's maybe like 1 or 2 that I'm not fond of. But they're split into 3 volumes on DVD. There's the early years, the war years, and the years of change. And the war years are definitely the best episodes. There's a couple of good ones in the Years of Change. I think Ogunga, the Giver and Taker of Life, is one of the better ones. Because that's near the end of the war, so it just kind of like migrates onto the Years of Change. Mystery of the Blues, which actually has Harrison Ford reprising his role as Indiana Jones. That one's one of my favorite episodes. It's kind of got a downer ending. Actually, all the young Indiana Jones movies have downer endings because he's walking through history, so he can't really change anything. So it's always like, well, yeah, we lost this time, but maybe next time. And that's the end of every episode, which kind of sucks. But like I said, I got a love-hate relationship with him. I fully admit that I watch Young Indiana Jones more than I watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull or Dear God, the Dial of Destiny. Let's talk about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for a little bit. I don't hate Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I think there's a lot of stuff in the movie I like. I've actually never minded the aliens in that movie. To me, it made perfect sense. The first Indiana Jones is very clearly based off of 1930s serials. The second one is kind of like a remake of Gunga Din. And Last Crusade really takes inspiration from Tintin, I believe. So, basing Crystal Skull off of 1950s alien movies isn't that like big of a stretch to me. I think the problem with it is just the sheer use of CGI. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, they use miniatures in like the opening scene. It's like, yeah, but there's also a CGI gopher at the beginning of the movie. There's CGI monkeys. There's so much CGI and it doesn't work. And his cinematographer at the time made Spielberg's movies look too clean. And I think that Indiana Jones specifically suffered from that quite a bit. Because that movie is so clean looking, and you juxtapose that with the original. It's so like dirty and grimy and like raw, and you feel like the fourth movie is just on a soundstage the whole time. The best part of that movie is the car chase scene on the motorcycle with Mutt, and I don't mind the idea of Mutt. I'm just not a big fan of Shia LaBeouf, but I do like the end of the movie quite a bit where they finally get married. Marion Ravenwood and Indiana Jones finally get married. It's like this big moment. And, you know, like, it seems like they're going to pass the torch to Mutt. And then Indiana Jones takes that hat away. Oh, there's more adventures to come. And I like that ending. It's hopeful. You get a little bit of closure with those two characters. And I don't know. I liked elements of it. But the problem is I felt like it was trying too hard to be like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it really should have been going a different direction. Instead of going to the Amazon and seeing like a Mayan pyramid or whatever it is, or a Peruvian pyramid at the end of that movie, they should have gone to Russia. Have that movie set in the snow, like have the action adventure segment of that movie. When they leave America, they go on their little adventure. Have it set in the snow. Have it set in Russia. I really feel like that would have fixed the movie more than anything else. Maybe it wouldn't have been great, but at least I think it would have been a little bit better. I think the movie that is impossible to fix is Dial of Destiny. Dear God, how could you make a movie that bad? You know, I say Raiders of the Lost Ark is the movie that made me want to make movies. Dial of Destiny made me never want to see a movie ever again. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but it was just I don't even want to say it was a disappointment because I really wasn't expecting much. But just narratively, just on a writing level, what a piece of crap. After all the progress you made with that character in the last one, you finally got him married, you just open up with him divorced, and it just doesn't feel organic at all. Like you could have written out Mutt's character, like, oh, he's at Vietnam right now. But instead they killed him off for a hollow emotional moment that I don't think worked in the movie because it didn't really feel like the movie was about anything. I don't know. I have a lot of mixed emotions about it. I have to say maybe I have to see it again, but I don't want to see it again. And don't get me wrong. Don't get me started on the ending of that movie. What an underwhelming ending. The bad guys are basically killed off camera. There's no satisfying end to any of those characters. You know, like I wanted to see Mads Mikkelsen like go out in a really awesome way, like we have in the previous 4 Indiana Jones movies. Like, I don't really like Kate Blanchett's exit in Crystal Skull, but it was certainly better than Mads Mikkelsen. And God. And then, like, Indiana Jones, like, oh, here, I want to stay in the past and die in history, which I think could have been handled well, but it just wasn't. And it just, like, so she punches him, and then, like, he's just knocked out for his hospital stay and his trip back to the United States, and then he just wakes up in America, and it's just like the whole ending where he gets reunited with Marion Ravenwood is so empty. It's a less satisfactory rehash of what we saw in Crystal Skull. And I think it really says something when Crystal Skull has a more satisfying conclusion. And I don't hate Crystal Skull, but it's definitely like the movie I don't. It's definitely the weakest movie but before Dial of Destiny came out, for sure. Dial of Destiny is not worth watching, in my opinion. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is like, I want one more, and then you go, well, I guess there is that one. You know, there's no reason to watch Dial of Destiny. Maybe one day I'll watch it again, but I just have no desire to. It just makes me depressed. Well, after talking about the worst Indiana Jones movie ever, let's talk about something a little bit more, I don't know, something that I actually care about. Let's talk about Rear Window. This is my favorite Hitchcock film. I know there's probably someone out there that's like, oh, Psycho or Dial M for Murder or whatever. I don't care. Rear Window is my favorite Hitchcock movie. I can watch this on repeat. It's I love the characters in it. I love the premise of it. Just the whole movie taking place in essentially a room, and you're looking out the window, and it's like there's so much fun trivia about it because it's one of the biggest sets of its time, but you're locked in that room until the very end of the movie. And you got Raymond Burr as the bad guy in it, which is funny because like he's Perry Mason. So if you watch him on TV, you're like, oh, he's catching the villains, and in this movie he is the villain. And Jimmy Stewart's a lot of fun. I like the relationship he has with the girl in the movie. I remember watching this for the first time. My mom owned a cleaning business, and I was at some millionaire's house, and I couldn't really like move around too much because, you know, she was afraid I was going to break something, so she's like, just watch TV. And I didn't know how to use their TV, so I was just watching whatever was on. And I was probably at the oldest 7. But whatever was on, I just was watching whatever was on, and I caught the end of some movie, and then Rear Window started. And I was like, oh, this looks boring, I don't want to watch it. And then I just got sucked into the movie. I got so into it. And I remember, like, the movie was almost over, and we had to leave. And I was like, Mom, please let me finish this movie. And it was so exciting. It was so fun. They've remade it a couple times. I hear Disturbia is a remake of it. I've never seen that. And to be honest, I don't really have a drive to, but I did see the remake with Christopher Reeves. And it's not terrible, but it definitely does feel like a direct-to-video remake. The scenes where Christopher Reeves is supposed to be not paralyzed, they have just a weird close-up on his face, I remember, and then the rest of the movie is basically just Rear Window. Except for at the very end, instead of like him pushing him out the window, he starts like pulling out his like tubes. I don't think it's a bad movie or anything, but it pales in comparison to the original Rear Window. I've seen Rear Window, I think 4 times in the theater. Every time it's in the theater, I make sure I go see it, and it's a whole different experience in the theater. It's like you really feel the scale of the set in the theater, which is kind of lost on the home video release. Just one of my favorite movies, definitely in my top 100. Let's move on from the terrestrial Rear Window to something a little bit more extraterrestrial. The War of the Worlds from, I can't remember what year it came out, but it was in the 50s. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite alien invasion movies from this time period. It's based on one of my favorite books. And I have not read it since I was very young, but when I was younger, I was really into classical literature. I really loved Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I still love Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Charles Dickens. Like, I haven't read Jules Verne or H.G. Wells since I was a kid, but I continue to go back to Charles Dickens and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. But War of the Worlds was one of my favorite books when I was a kid, and I was determined to see every single adaptation of The War of the Worlds. And the original is so fun, and it feels so dark for a movie of its time and its kind. And I really like that. I really love the ending with the church. And as much as I lament the fact that they couldn't do the tripods, I really like the design of the tripods equivalent to the movie, the little spaceships with the little like laser legs. I love the sound design in that movie. I hear that noise that the aliens make in like everything. I think I heard it in an episode of Justice League. It's just a really fun movie. I love that it starts off with black and white and it's like World War I, World War II, and it's showing all this footage and it's in black and white, and then suddenly it says the War of the Worlds and it's in like bright red or green, and I'm a little colorblind, but it's one of those colors, and it's like boom, and it's like, oh shoot, it's gonna go down. And I as much as I like this movie, I really wish Ray Harryhausen got to make his version, because there's those clips of what he had envisioned. And I think that probably would have been more in tune with the book. It's a really difficult book to adapt, because my recollection of it is it really doesn't have a main character. In this version, it's a Dr. Forrester, which they later used that name, Clayton Forrester, which is the name they used for the villain in the Mystery Science Theater TV show, which as a fan of both those things, I love that little reference. But yeah, I just a really fun movie, and it spawned a really interesting TV show. I don't think a lot of people know about this, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's a TV show sequel to this, and it's really, really weird. There's 2 seasons of it, and they're both radically different. The second season is more like a dystopia like thing. I never finished the second season, but I did finish the first season. And it's really, really violent. It's gory, and it's like a body snatchers type thing. It's really bizarre. It's really interesting too. It's got a lot of fun characters, and I should really watch it again, because it is such a strange anomaly that I should go back and watch it, because it's just weird. Like, it's so violent. It's so gory. It's like on par with, and this is probably a deep cut, but the Nightmare on Elm Street TV series. It's just really gory, and it was the weird part about being gory is it wasn't a cable show. It was a syndication show. So this was on regular television, and it was just so violent. And the tone of it's so weird too, because it has the tone of like a kid's show, but it's gory. So it's a weird anomaly, and it spawned from a movie that does not match it in tone whatsoever. And it's also the TV show came out in the late 80s, and the movie came from the like 50s or 60s or whatever. It's just weird. The whole idea of that show is just strange. But fast forward to 2005, and there was not 1, not 2, but 3 War of the Worlds movies. Yeah, there's the one that was directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Cruise, which at the time it came out, I was not a fan of, because, I was a kid and it was my favorite book. So I was like, oh, this is like, they made it too much of an action movie. I had little dumb quips about that. Now, I don't really care about that now. I mean, like, it's honestly just a difficult book to adapt. Yeah, I wanted to see every adaptation of it, and there was 3 in the course of 1 year. I can admit that it's good now, because it's got a lot of really cool set pieces. I think the only thing I don't really like about the movie is I don't like the way they do the laser blast where it turns people into dust. I think it seems silly, and even when I watched it the first time, before I saw any parodies of it, I just thought it was like kind of a dumb effect. And I also don't like that the aliens come from the ground. And Steven Spielberg's explanation as to why he made that change, instead of them coming from the sky, he was like, oh, I want them to come from the ground because we've seen them come from the sky a million times. But I don't know, you're adapting the War of the Worlds. You're not adapting like V or whatever. Like, that's the story. That's the template. And I don't know, I just was not a fan of that part of the book, of the movie. But I really like the relationship with the daughter specifically, which Dakota Fanning is like, as a kid, she was so strange because she felt like an adult in a child's body. And it always kind of weirded me out, and she's definitely like full adult in child's body in that movie. But I really like the quiet moments where he's like singing to her that calm her down when he's about to go kill that crazy guy. I really like what they did with the son. The ending feels very, very rushed, but maybe that's the point. But it's a movie I continually go back to because I think it's pretty great, honestly. I also really like the David Michael Latt version that came out the same year. This was the movie that kind of spawned Asylum's whole mockbuster thing, because I believe this was the first one they did that with. And the history behind it was David Michael Latt, he wanted to make a War of the Worlds movie, and he was in the production of it, and they go, hey, sorry, you can't make it. Steven Spielberg's going to make it now. So he had this script, and he was like, well, you know what? I have my own studio. I'm just going to make my own version. And he did, and I really like the direction he took with it. It's just the budget kind of... This was before the mockbusters just got, like, straight up bad. I think there's a lot of good ideas in his version. It's just the budget's so poor, and I really feel like he captured more so of the mood of the book with a modern setting. I tell you, but there was another version that came out from the same year from Pendragon Pictures, I believe, and I don't remember much about this movie. I remember the main character has a fake mustache that is super distracting, and it is almost like it's too close to the book. It's so much of a faithful adaptation that it's actually a detriment. I remember, I think it's like 3 hours long, and they have a lot of stuff from the book that's not in other versions, at least not at the time. They have the black gas, they have the flying machine. So it's interesting in that regard, but it's not worth watching in my opinion. And they've made like 1 million War of the Worlds movies since. They have like 2 TV shows on right now, I think, and Tubi has a new War of the Worlds movie like every other day. So I doubt I'll be able to get caught up with all the War of the Worlds adaptations. I've been talking a lot about movies that I have fond memories for from my childhood, but I want to talk about a movie that has a very mixed place in my childhood memories because I both loved it and hated it as a kid, and that was The Explorers. I remember I rented this movie a lot as a kid, and I recall I would get it, and I would watch it up to a certain point, and then I would stop it, and I wouldn't watch any further. And it was because I really loved the stuff with the kids building the spaceship. I loved the mystery. I just hated the aliens at the end, because I thought they were obnoxious, and I thought I hated the ending of the movie. As a kid, I hated it, but I loved the beginning so much. I was like, it's like the Goonies, but about science, because I loved science fiction as a kid. And I watched this movie like all the time, and I bought it like a year or two ago, and I had that same like childhood like interest. I was like, oh man, this movie's like really fun. I'm really enjoying this. And then I got to the aliens. But I think I kind of like the aliens more now as an adult because it is like it's objectionably terrible. But it's kind of fun. It's a lot goofier than I remembered from my childhood. I was like, oh, it's all serious until they get to space. And it's not that way at all. It's a lot sillier. But there's like a lot of like fragments here and there in the movie that seems like it's going to amount to something. Like Dick Miller's in it, and it seems like he has a connection with the kids, and all of that is dropped. It's a fascinating little mess, and I don't regret watching it. It's got a very young Ethan Hawke and a very young River Phoenix. It's one of those movies where if it got a remake, I would be all for it, because I think there's enough good stuff there. I don't know if they would be able to do it well. I don't know. This is the age of like everything ripping off Stranger Things, so maybe it could work. Just fix that ending. Remake it and fix the ending, because I think you have something really special there. And it's directed by Joe Dante, who's one of my favorite directors. So, which I didn't know as a kid. You know, movies were just movies as a kid. But yeah, I'd be very much down to see a remake of that. And, you know, I'll always have the original if it doesn't work out well. It's not like the original's perfect. But, yeah, Just a fun little anomaly from my childhood. I can't believe I rented it so much, considering how much I hated that ending. But you know what ending I don't hate? The ending to Suspiria. That's right. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel for segues into talking about other movies. But don't worry, we're almost done. Suspiria is my favorite. No, I won't say it's my favorite. It's one of my favorites. I actually think The Stenzel Syndrome is my favorite Dario Argento movie. I say that while not exactly knowing if I pronounced the syndrome correctly, but we're just going to move on. We're just going to pretend that I know I said it correctly. Suspiria is great, though. I remember the first time I saw it, I went to a sleepover. I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of horror movies growing up, so I used to go to this one guy's house to watch horror movies because it was kind of the only place I could watch them. He was like, "Oh, Joey, you're Italian. You're going to love this. This is an Italian horror movie." And I watched it, and I was like, what the heck is this? I'd never seen a movie like it before. I don't want to say I hated it, but I was just really confused. I was like, what's happening? I couldn't figure out, like, what is this movie? And it wasn't till, like, I want to say it was, like, maybe like a couple months later, I was like, hey, can I borrow that movie? Because the imagery was just trapped in my head. The soundtrack. I'd never experienced anything like that before. And, you know, I've since seen a lot of movies. I don't want to say the same kind of movies, but movies in a similar vein, a lot more dreamy. It's weird, actually. I remember being into David Lynch at the time. I don't know, maybe my memories are collapsing in on themselves. Yeah, I just remember just like, I got to see this movie again. I love the color in the movie. I love the sound. I know a lot of people can't get past the dubbing in Italian movies, and I love it. To me, that's part of the package. And there's debate among Giallo fans on whether or not Suspiria is a Giallo. And my 2 cents on the matter is, I believe there's a book. I can't remember what it's called. It's an academic book about Giallo, and I don't agree with everything in the book. But he has a list of different kinds of Giallo, and one of them is Giallo Fantastica. I think that's what he wrote. Instead of writing fantastical Giallo, he wrote it like that. But he said that it's a Giallo with a supernatural element. Because there's a lot of fans out there that say that, like, the moment you have a fantastic element, it's no longer a Giallo. So, like, something like Phenomena would not be a Giallo because she can communicate with bugs. And I disagree there. I think that movie is a Giallo, and the weird bug element has very little bearing. But this movie, I think it's Giallo adjacent for sure. I hesitate to call it a Giallo, mainly because I'm afraid of people like attacking me for saying that. But it's definitely Giallo adjacent. I mean, there's like the Black Glove Killer. The only thing that really separates it from a Giallo is it's not a serial killer. It's witches. And honestly, that element, I think the merging of those two things, the supernatural and like the more familiar Giallo format, really creates this really interesting monster. I actually quite like the sequel, Inferno, quite a bit. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's a whole different animal. And the third movie, Mother of Tears, starts off good and then just becomes the worst movie ever made. But yeah, that first movie, I love the dreamy vibe to it. Like the moment she steps through those doors at the beginning of the movie and gets out into the rain, it just becomes such a surreal experience. It feels like a nightmare. I don't know how the Italians were able to capture that vibe of sleep. I feel like very few American filmmakers have been able to pull that off. I think like David Lynch for sure has pulled it off in a couple of his movies, but like the Italians, like they seem to do it without even trying. And I think I'll end this off by talking about the remake of Suspiria, which I've only seen once, and I don't think I'll ever watch again. Not because I thought it was a bad movie, but just because it just didn't hit the same fancy as the original. It's literally the opposite of the original movie. It stars Dakota Johnson, who is in my favorite movie of all time, Madam Web. You know, that quote from the trailer is forever stuck in my mind. He was in the Amazon researching spiders with my mom. Wait, no, God, I messed it up. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died. That's the line. How could I forget? That's the best line ever. That's what cinema was made for. It was made for that line. At the time I saw Suspiria, that was the first movie I think I ever saw Dakota Johnson in. I've since seen her in other things, and I think she's a terrible actress. Every time I see her in something, she just seems completely uninterested in what she's doing. And I think that's a negative for other things she's in, but it was a positive for the kind of movie Suspiria was. Because it is such a low energy, artsy films tend to have characters that just kind of like, they kind of float through their lines. And it's fine in those kind of movies. So she's like designed for this kind of film. So it's not a negative she's in it, it's actually a positive. It's a negative for something like Madam Web. But, yeah, the problem, my issue with the movie is that it's called Suspiria, because it's the basic premise from the original. And they've done and gone their own thing. But, if I'm going to watch something called Suspiria, I want that dreaminess, I don't want the more... I'm not really into the direction they took with it. Because there's other movies that are like Suspiria. Oh, it's a coven of witches that have, like, some sort of school. There's a movie called The Woods with Bruce Campbell as I think the father in that movie. And it's basically a Suspiria remake without all the dreamy Dario Argento stuff. And to me, that's a better remake of Suspiria, even though it's not a remake of Suspiria. It's just kind of a similar premise, and that's what this movie does. But the problem I have with this movie is it's so long. I don't feel like the length is justified. I can't imagine ever throwing this movie on ever again. And it's not because it's a bad movie. It just didn't hit the spot in my brain that made me love the original. And it was fine. I don't... Tilda Swinton plays like 3 characters in it. And one of them just felt like, well, we can't have her just play 2 characters. We got to have her play 3. So they just threw her in as another character somewhere else in the movie for like 5 scenes where she does practically nothing. And then the 2 big characters she plays the big witch, and then she plays a rubber man. And I remember when I watched it, I saw it with a group because we had a friend who passed away, and Suspiria was his favorite movie, and he was really looking forward to it. And so we all watched it together in memorandum of him, and it was funny when it ended. The guy who brought the movie was like, yeah, he would have really liked this movie, and then he left, and we're like, he would have hated this movie because it didn't have anything that he liked about it in it, and I'm pretty certain he wouldn't. I don't think he would have hated it, but I don't think he would have loved it. Tilda Swinton's so unconvincing as the man character because her voice sounds very feminine, and then she just looks like a big rubber man. There's very few moments in the movie where she looks convincing as an old man, and it's usually done with lighting is when she looks good. But, I probably sound like I hated the movie. I didn't hate the movie. I liked the ending quite a bit. It was just the journey there. There's good set pieces in the movie, but there's too much space in between. There's not enough character stuff to really justify the space in between for me. I don't know. I did like the twist at the end, which I won't give away, because... it's not a bad movie. I understand that I'm probably making it sound like a bad movie. No, it's a great movie. It's just not for me. It's I know that's like kind of a hard thing for some people to comprehend here on the internet for whatever reason. But there's a lot of movies that I can say are good movies I just don't like, and this is one of them. I will probably never ever watch it again, but I'm glad I did watch it because it was a really interesting direction. And if this director ever did the sequels, like if he ever did an adaptation of Inferno or Mother of Tears, I would probably see those opening day just to see what they would be like. But, this wasn't for me. If I want to watch Suspiria, I'm going to watch the weird Dario Argento movie that came out way back when, because that is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies from him. It's the movie that made me that put him on my radar. And maybe it's just I'm too stuck in the past. I don't know. But not a bad movie. Maybe I'm a bad person for not liking it. I don't know. But that concludes the first episode of Clean Your Room. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I plan on doing 6 of these. And if you guys enjoy it and you want me to do more, I'll add a Q&A section to this after the first 6 episodes. I don't want to put too much work on me, especially if I don't know if this is going to work. But I thank you for listening to me talk for 2 hours. I hope it was a fun experience. I really don't know. I've never tried anything like this before. But I really appreciate your, I want to say your viewership, but your listenership, if that's a word. And I'll see you in about a month. Or you'll hear me in about a month. And, talk to you later. And be kind and rewind and all that jazz.